I'm Coco Brown, founder and CEO of Athena Alliance. Athena is a global digital community for top women in business. We support women as they rise into the C-suite and the boardroom. We also help boards consider the types of leaders they need for their boards if they want to remain relevant, and fast track their connections to female leaders to help them do so. At Athena, we work on both sides of the equation. We have helped nearly 400 private and public company boards think through and identify the right person for their board, for open board seats. And we have brought more than 100 women to board seats, from Series A startups to Fortune 500. And we've supported over 1,000 women as they rise to the senior-most ranks of leadership. Regardless of who you are, and regardless of whether or not you want to join a board, you are in the right place this morning. You should not prepare for the boardroom once you feel ready to be there, to serve there, but long before then. Why? Well, because whether an individual specifically has a goal to serve on an outside corporate board or not, there comes a point in her senior career where she must understand the boardroom. As a senior leader in the top ranks of a company, you will be relevant to your own board. You will be known by them, and you may be engaging with them formally or informally. So even if you don't know if board work is something you want, you need to lean in and think about yourself in this context as a senior leader. In this short talk, what I want to help you with is the language to shape the board landscape so you can think about your best fit within it. In the US alone, there are 6,000 public companies that are NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange listed. There are another 6,000 ESOPs, which are employee stock owned companies. There are about 8,000 private equity backed companies, and there are more than 10,000 venture backed companies. That's at least 30,000 companies, which means about 200,000 plus board seats. Very few of these board seats are ever touched by traditional recruiting efforts. In fact, over 90% of them will be filled through a pretty narrow network of people already in the ecosystem of the founder, funders, and existing board members. It's in part for this reason that we know that for even the most obvious board candidates, it can take 2 to 3 years to land a board seat. When we think about the most vocal news with respect to women on boards, for example, recently 2020 women on boards, now becoming 50-50 women on boards, that's fantastic, but we have to remember that they and most of the media focus on the narrow set of the Russell 3000, just 10% of the entire landscape. While women represent 26% of those board roles, they do not come close in most other realms. Additionally, about 80% of public companies are in fact small and micro-cap companies. This means they look more like venture-backed private companies than our traditional view of what a public company is. I have been talking to a lot of NASDAQ CEOs recently. Some of them have 5 to 10 million in revenue. They have less than 100 employees. And the conversations with these CEOs are much more like the ones I have with Series A and Series B venture-backed and later stage or growth stage startups. My point is this: we need to understand the full landscape, and we need to understand that it is vast, and therefore our advice needs to be tailored as we talk about it. Here's one way to think about the vastness of the landscape, and a tool to figure out your own personal starting point. There are 4 major differentiators to start with. I touched on governing structure for entities that are likely to need independent directors: public companies, venture-backed, private equity-backed, and ESOPs. There are 3 other lenses on the landscape that help you narrow in on what you might strive for, at least as your first board role: scale, business model, and industry or sector. Depending on these 4 variables, the structure, needs, and focus of the company and the board will be very different. Even before thinking about your specific value proposition, there are ways to zoom in for where to start. Before we do so, I want to first address this question. If the landscape is so vast, why does it feel so small to women? And why is it, Coco, that you disagree that women hold 26% of board seats? Again, the reason for that last point, is that only 10% of the landscape is the Russell 3000 that has 26%. So this is actually the more accurate reality for women. While we start over 50% of businesses, women receive only 2% of venture funding. That's 2% of billions of dollars. And further, women are only 9% of the investors deciding who gets the funding in venture capital, private equity, and so on. When it comes to being a CEO, men named James or Michael hold 5% of all CEO roles. Men with just one of those two names are just as likely to become a CEO as any woman, period. Two names hold the same power as an entire gender. Now, things are improving in the Fortune 500, for example, with 8% of those top roles being held by women. But recall that the Fortune 500 is, again, a small segment of the 30,000 companies I mentioned prior. And then there is the corporate boardroom. There's a long tail of public companies, the vast majority, that have only 15 to 9% of women on their boards. And in fact, in private companies, women hold just 7% of board seats. And only 60% of private company, or actually, in fact, 60% of private company boards have no women on them at all. Why are these stats so bad? Well, with respect to young companies, private companies, smaller public companies, the reason is this. We don't see women in the C-suite as CEOs or on boards, largely because the funding for growth is not being given to women. As I mentioned, 98% of funding goes to male founders, and 92% of investors are also men. So if companies are being funded by men and founded by men, then naturally the people at the top of those companies and in the boardrooms will be men. I live this reality. Next slide, Risa. My story is not unlike that of most women who make it to the top of business leadership. I spent the bulk of my career as a lone woman in a male-dominated field, technology. This is me at one of the last in-person conferences last year. For 17 years, I was with a deeply technical IT infrastructure professional services company. Today, that company, Taos, is a Gartner-recognized top 20 global cloud professional and managed services provider. I was promoted to VP of that company when I was 28 years old, largely because I asked for it. Then, between 1992 and 2002, I was instrumental in a meteoric expansion of the business in the dot-com boom, and sadly, then in saving it after the dot-com bust. By mid-2002, the company had nearly imploded, dropping from $100 million in revenue to just $10 million as we emerged from a tech catastrophe that took out most of the dot-com world at the time. So I went from being the vice president of professional services, laying off about 700 staff over 12 months, to president, COO, and part owner of the company with now just 70 staff. I didn't have the skills to be president and COO. I was given a shot, and I bet on myself. From 2002 through 2003, we negotiated out of leases around the country, rebuilt relationships with customers in hopes of better times, rethought the business model, and landed our first managed services deal, which saved our business. By 2004, we were in the clear, and I was in charge of a viable, growing business. From there, I started diversifying into managed services and project-based services. Everything I tried was new to me, but I just knew I could do it, and I just kept pushing forward. And then I took a breath, and I realized there I was. Every part of the business reported to me. I was the only report to the CEO, and I realized I was alone. On the outside, I looked strong, successful, and confident, but on the inside, my self-talk turned negative. I had never touched a line of code in my life. I was a psychology major. Nearly all of my customers, such as CIOs and VPs of infrastructure, were men. Nearly all of my delivery staff, sysadmins, network engineers, database administrators, and so on, were men. And in my early 30s, I looked like I was in my 20s. Despite my achievements, my self-talk, reinforcing the biases that truly were around me, started to get in my way. Battling back my fears of being an imposter, in 2005, I started to form my own board of advisors. It took the form of a dinner group first, with CIOs, that being my community at the time. CIOs including Jerry Martin-Flickinger, who's now the CTO of Starbucks. Tama Alver, now in her late 70s, but at the time CIO of Aplera and formerly Quantum and Informix before that. Sunny Adzadeh, currently CIO of Global Logic. Jessica Denekor, currently on the boards of Iron Mountain and PG&E. Sharon Mandel, now the CIO of Juniper Networks. Gina Rehag, now a VP at AWS. Mercedes DeLuca, CIO of Pebble Beach, and Marty Minacho, now SVP at MindBody. This grew over the years, and by 2015, we welcomed any C-suite function and numbered 152. Next slide. Over the past 4 years, Athena has transformed from a high-touch coaching program to a fully digital community for CEOs, investors, founders, board directors, and women on the rise. The group of women who I held dinners with quarterly is now a global community of women. And now we get together weekly, virtually, same level of support, now digital, now global, and now much bigger. As small as the numbers of women at the top are, we collectively still amount to millions of women in the VP ranks and above globally. In fact, 622,000 women in the US alone in companies of over 500 employees are at the VP ranks and above. What Athena is doing is harnessing that network to ensure that women can take 6 degrees of separation to what they want and make it 1. So what do? 4 things. First, we are a vital network. We integrate industries, roles, geographies, ecosystems of community groups, etc., to bring women together into one powerful network where we can help each other gain anything we need: information, advice, introductions, etc. Think of us as LinkedIn, but exclusive and with warm introductions as opposed to cold outreaches. This is just a few of the women that are part of Athena. We number just shy of 1,000 now, 946 as of today. Some of these women you may recognize, like Tony Towns-Whitney, who is the president of regulated industries for Microsoft. Second, we offer dynamic and pragmatic learning. Remember I said you need to learn about this realm, whether you want to be there or not? We teach the hard skills needed in the C-suite and the boardroom, from compensation development to CEO evaluation to how to read a cap table to boardroom finances and so on. We have 2 to 3 live events a week that are recorded, edited, and then become a part of our library of hundreds of pieces of content developed almost entirely by very experienced female leaders and board directors. Third, we offer access to opportunities. Every opportunity that comes to us comes to our members so they can see patterns and lobby for their fit, whether our match percentages say they are a match or not. We also put our members in networks like Equilar, Diligent, New Role, the Board List, Him for Her, and we are recommenders for board roles to Deloitte, BDO, PwC, and others. Think of us as a Hollywood agent, helping to make sure you are seen in all the right places and helping you get auditions. And finally, women can add to their membership. They can choose to get coaching from us and or a brand package from Athena. One of our coaches is here, Chimin Bolin, as is Jenna Lang, if you know her. In this way, we help you figure out and how to position yourself for your best board matches or your best matches to your career moves. Recall I talked at the beginning about figuring out what your safeties, your matches, and your reaches are in that landscape of all of those board opportunities, that 30,000 companies. You need to figure out and zero in on where your fit is. We help you do that with your brand package and your positioning. Our model is proven, valued, and growing. That's all I have time for you for now, but I am thrilled to participate in the Q&A after the panel and in the Executive Leadership Power Circle sessions post after that, where 5 actually of our experienced board directors will also be there to help you think through and explore your path to the boardroom and to that realm of overarching stewardship of business in general. Thank you so much.
That was fabulous, Coco. I can't believe there are more James and Michaels than women. So many thoughts and insights for us. The chat was going crazy while you were doing your session. So thank you very much, and look forward to having you back for the Q&A session and, of course, during the